Today I'm with Stephanie Saroki de Garcia. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation.
You've done a lot in your life. You had a leading role at Seton Education Partners. You were the chair of the Committee on School Leadership for the Archdiocese of New York. You were one of the Dean's Fellows at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And at the time, you also worked for the Office of Management and Budget, which sounds boring, but as Tucker Carlson recently showed in his interview of Russ Vought, is actually very important for the governing of our nation. So given all your experiences, and including as an excellent teacher yourself, you won several teaching awards as a teacher, where do you think Catholic education, charter school education is right now, and where are we going?
Yeah, well, there are many exciting things happening in the school choice arena. And I am a huge supporter of parental choice in education. I believe deeply that parents should have the right to send their children to schools that best meet their children's needs. And in this country, if you have money, you have choices. And if you don't have money, you often are limited to failing government schools that too often undermine the relationship between parent and child. But what's been amazing is that post-COVID, there has been a proliferation of new schools, including micro schools, including private faith-based schools, and there's been widespread passage of school choice laws in so many states. And that gives me great hope.
So I just got to ask, maybe this is just weighing on me. I just need to vent sometimes. So I just appreciate your patience. Why isn't there a widespread mass protest of parents on the street for how much money they're paying for public school? Parents and non-parents, I should say. How much money we're paying for public schools, how broken the system is intellectually. The students are not receiving an excellent education or even a mediocre education. And then to add insult to injury, they're being actively deformed morally by the school that the parents have entrusted their kids to.
So it's interesting. I started my education career as a Teach for America Corps member. I had been a rhetoric major at UC Berkeley. I'm one of 6 children. I'm from a strong Catholic immigrant family. And I remember my mom saying to me, "What the heck is rhetoric, Stephanie?" I said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm going to law school." And then I never did that because I joined Teach for America. And at the time, Teach for America wanted to take high achieving college grads and place them in the toughest to staff schools in the country. And I was placed in Oakland, California as a high school English teacher in the second toughest high school in Oakland. And I remember being a walking ball of anger. I was angry at the district, the principal. I was angry at myself for every child I failed. Many of my 10th graders had never been taught to read.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
By my 10th graders? Which part?
Yeah, but not being taught to read. Yeah, what do you mean by they hadn't been taught to read?
So I was a 10th and 11th grade. I was a 10th and 11th grade English teacher. And many of my 10th graders had never been taught to read. 45 of the classes at that high school where I taught had no teacher for the first 3 months of school.
Well, I'm sorry. Just so 10th and 11th graders, they hadn't been taught to read. Like, what do you mean by that? If they see a page with words on it, how do they respond to that?
They had difficulty even reading the words on in a typical 10th grade novel. And I remember
they can't recognize the word. They can't pronounce the words.
They had difficulty reading. They had difficulty reading a full sentence, yes. And they had not been exposed to high-level text. The expectations for our children had been really dumbed down. And I remember one day we had the SWAT team at our school outside my classroom. And after the SWAT team left, we had a lunch meeting with English teachers, and nobody even mentioned that we had the SWAT team at our school. It had become completely normalized. And it's actually, I had left, I was a fallen away Catholic, I would say, during my time at UC Berkeley, but my time teaching in Oakland actually brought me back to my faith. In part because the children that I was serving were deeply spiritual and would come to me with problems that no teenager should have to face. And I had a really hard time navigating a public education system that didn't allow you to have conversations with children about God. I think I'm going off your topic though, off your question.
This is pretty good, actually. Yeah, if you keep developing, keep going if you want to develop this further. But for context, my original question was, where are we and where are we going?
Yeah. So one of the reasons, so when I left teaching, I went to the Kennedy School and I wanted to figure out why in this country we allow children to go to schools like the one where I taught. And I ended up leaving the Kennedy School working in philanthropy. And my job was to highlight the most exciting and most effective initiatives in the country that were serving underserved children. And I didn't go to Catholic school myself growing up. My family could not afford that. But I learned about the rich tradition of Catholic education, this 200-year tradition where a busload of nuns started and ran schools for the most vulnerable children, especially new immigrants. And I also learned about the demise of Catholic education in this country. 3.5 million children lost since 1960. 7,000 Catholic schools closed. And so I was having dinner with an atheist who I really admired and wanted to try to do something about Catholic education. How do we offer families who want it a Catholic education free of charge? He said, "Stephanie, I'll do it if you do it with me." And I went home to my brother. I went home and called my older brother and said, "Anthony, I know what God wants me to do with my life. Call me back." And so we started Seton Education Partner at the height of the Great Recession. Everyone who we knew of great means and wealth was afraid to invest in a new initiative. We wanted to find a new way forward. So you can ask me about the challenges of entrepreneurial leadership, but we've served over 20,000 children. We pioneered 4 breakthrough schooling models for Catholic education, and those models are really interesting.
Yeah, I am very interested in the challenges of entrepreneurial leadership, actually. Actually, that's one of the missions of this show. So yeah, if you are able to tell us a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I think entrepreneurial organizations go through different challenges at different stages of their development. So in the beginning, you have to prove that you have a good idea and that you're the right people to launch and lead those ideas and prove those ideas. And so in the beginning, the biggest challenge was convincing people that there are different ways to approach a big challenge. We were often misunderstood by church and secular leaders. And I totally understand that because we were new and we were responding to a big challenge in this country in a different way. I think our biggest challenge has been building capacity to meet the tremendous desire for this work. We get weekly calls and emails from parents, from church leaders, asking us to bring our model to their communities. And I always get on the phone. I share my wisdom with those people. I give them advice, but we haven't yet built the organizational capacity to respond to the desire for our work.
What statistics or evidence would you provide to show that what you're offering is superior to the school in Oakland where the 10th grader cannot read a full sentence?
Yes. So we one of our core values is results matter. And we believe that what doesn't get measured doesn't get paid attention to. And so there are 3 things that matter to us: academic excellence, rich formation in the virtues, and robust Catholic faith formation. On the academic side, our scholars far outperform their peers in the district, and they even outperform their peers in the city and in the state. So from an academic standpoint, our scholars are doing much better than their peers. On the faith and the virtue part, those are actually really hard things to measure. And we've had many discussions about whether or not we should be trying to measure them. But we did develop a tool, and it requires children to reflect, which is really important, on their character growth, also their parents and their teachers to reflect on their character growth. On the faith formation side, What was really interesting to us is that when we launched our first school in the Bronx, we did this at Cardinal Dolan's request. The Archdiocese had shut down 60 plus Catholic schools. And it was a heartbreaking decision. And the Cardinal didn't want to make that decision, but had to make that decision. And he asked Seton Education Partners if there was a way to continue serving children in the communities that lost their Catholic schools. He's a very courageous man. But when we launched our first school, we launched with kindergartners and first graders. The best way to build a great school serving underserved children is to start young, start small, and grow a grade level at a time, so you can build really strong school culture. And we have an after school. We have two types of schools. We have charter schools that are classically inspired and have a strong emphasis on virtue formation. And those schools are paired with daily after school faith formation. And then in states that do have private school choice, we launch top to bottom Catholic schools. In our charter schools, our after school program is called El Camino, and it's daily. And in our first year, there was a lesson on the baptism of Jesus, and we had a child raise their hand and say, "I want to get baptized." And these are not babies, and so we had a series of conversations with parents because, of course, this needs to be the decision of parents. And parents were really transformed by the changes they were seeing in their children. Their children would come home, they would have more joy. They would work harder in school. They would ask their parents, "Why don't we pray before our meals?" They would start asking their parents to take them to church on Sunday. And then whole families would be transformed. And so in the past decade, we've had 287 children join the Catholic Church through the sacrament of baptism, which has been stunning to us. And then we have a bunch of other metrics. So half of our families say that they pray more often. 40% go to church more often. The pastors we work with say that their pews are fuller because of our work.
Wow. Well, when you're talking about baptism, you're talking about salvation for an eternal soul. That's huge. That's literally incalculable. So how would you address the objection and in part you have, that the students perform better in your schools because it's like a selection bias, the parents choose to go to that school, and so it's like the better parents from the public school who end up going over? How do you address that?
So what's interesting, charter schools are required to do a lottery. And so parents apply. If more parents apply than you have seats available, you do a lottery. I do think that there's probably some selection bias in any school of choice because it requires a parent to do research and to actively choose. But our demographics mirror the demographics of our district. So in our Bronx schools, 1 out of 5 of our children have special needs. 35% of our children are multi-language learners. 95% of our children qualify for the federal meals program, which is a measure of family poverty. And that completely matches our neighborhood district schools.
Yeah, I guess it would be hard to measure, like, as you said, the level of parent interest and involved, or maybe it wouldn't be hard to measure, but that's really the measure that would be interesting in this regard. Is like, what is the family culture of the parents who choose to send their kids to this school versus just do what everyone else is doing?
There have been a bunch, not for our charter network, but for charter schools in general, there has been really strong research comparing parents who wanted to get into a charter school but couldn't get into a charter school because of the lottery, and looking at the outcomes of their children versus the outcomes of the children in the charter schools. And the outcomes are dramatically different. Now, not every charter school is the same, but that is one answer to people's skepticism around schools of choice.
Yeah, I think that's a convincing argument right there. I'm just curious, you had mentioned that Cardinal Dolan is a very courageous man. What makes you say that?
So when the Archdiocese had to close these schools, a bunch of people had asked Cardinal Dolan, "What about charter schools?" And he asked me to speak to him, his auxiliary bishops, his CFO, his general counsel, and to present to him on what the pros and the cons of that opportunity were. And no one in that room wanted to try this except for Cardinal Dolan. And he said,
"Wow,
I think we should try it."
Wow, that's
And
leadership right there.
that's leadership and it's courage. And it's rooted in a love for people. And he was the first in the nation to do this. And now we have bishops across the country asking us to do more of this work.
Why wouldn't the others be in support of that?
So I think in many ways for good reasons. They don't want to give up on existing Catholic schools. Public-private partnerships can be challenging. So I don't think and I think in general there's inertia and I think bishops have a lot that they have to deal with. So there are many competing priorities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's for sure. So you have calls weekly to a request to expand to different areas. You're not able to meet those needs. What is it? What is the biggest challenge you face that's holding back the spread that you'd like to see?
So I would say two things, people and money. So people are everything. And you can't build an effective organization. You can't build an effective school without outstanding talent. And it's really important that people are not only effective at what they're doing, but that they're completely aligned to your mission. And so, you have to attract the right people. You have to nurture those people. You have to support them. You have to hold them to high expectations. And it's interesting. One of our senior leaders who was really successful in finance used to say that Seton is the rare blend of Mother Teresa and Goldman Sachs. And I love that description because excellence is really important. It has to be excellent, but also people who believe deeply in your mission and your core values matters. And then philanthropy. So all of our schools are sustainable long-term financially, but they have significant startup costs because we start with smaller classes and we grow grade level at a time. And so you need philanthropists who are willing to help the school get launched. We acquire and we renovate facilities. So there are a variety of startup costs. They end up being long-term financially sustainable, but it takes time to get there.
One thing I was surprised by is when you said that the school in Oakland, that I don't know if we can even use the name school to describe that experience, but the students, again, just using that because I don't know what other word to use, they opened up to you spiritually, personally on a deeper level. That surprised me. That impressed me. I'm wondering if students are still like that. And I don't know to what extent you're in direct contact with students these days, given your leadership responsibilities. But I wonder if you've seen a kind of, unfortunately, like darkness settle on young people these days because of the widespread prevalence of pornography and the addiction to smartphones.
I thought that your two podcasts, those were the two that I really listened to on screen time for children and how damaging it is for them. I think it's a huge issue, and I think parents need to take back control of what their children are consuming, especially on screens. When I was teaching, my students invited me to their parishes, and I would worship with them from a variety of different denominations. And so I was serving Black and Latino children predominantly, and their families were deeply spiritual. So this was a part of their lives. Do I think that there is more darkness because of some of the evils of the internet? Yes, I do. And I think anytime there's darkness, there's always light and there's always hope.
Well, thank you. Someone needs to have the hope and someone needs to be positive. So I appreciate that. In fact, sometimes that's also part of the mission of this show is to encourage people that, hey, even if the ship's going down, I really don't know how to finish that positively. But the point is, never stop fighting. Never stop fighting.
Never stop fighting. And what's interesting, you asked about entrepreneurial leadership. In my experience, when you have setbacks, that often is a sign that you should continue to persevere in your mission. And, my advice to entrepreneurs is be not afraid. Do not be afraid and do not make decisions rooted in fear. Anytime you make a decision rooted in fear, that is almost always the wrong decision. Lean into hope.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so on an optimistic, hopeful note, it appears in a different moment right now. So I would love to get your thoughts on Linda McMahon, nominee for Secretary of Education, and where you think we have the opportunity to go.
Not going to. Listen, I have decided. No, listen, this is me. I don't even watch the news anymore. And I know that
Neither do I. Who watches the news?
that may seem, or even, getting, using X to get my information. I have found that the three most important things I need to do are to be a good wife, a good mother, and then to use my gifts to serve others. And I've found the news and, frankly, politics to be incredibly distracting. And I know that will be very weird for people to hear. And so
I know exactly what you mean.
yeah. I've stopped spending my time, on that, because we have limited time on this earth. And the most important time we spend, from my experience, are time with people, and then time, if you're a person of faith, with God. And if you do those two things, you will live a happy life and a life of meaning and purpose.
Well, I think you have your priorities right. So most important.
I appreciate that. I don't always live up to them, but those are the ones I want to live up to.
Well, it's pretty simple, and I think common sense, frankly, and we all, I think we know it pretty much deep down, but child of God, mother, wife, friends, those are the most important things in life, most important relationships. Relationships are the most important things in life. So I'm also very attuned to distraction and focus. I coach people in peak performance, and I practice it myself every day. I'm very attuned to anxiety and mindfulness. So I don't watch the news. I mean, it's entertainment and it's fear mongering, even if it's just a newspaper. So you're not going to get the truth from it. However, at the same time, I'm telling you my perspective, which I'm trying to think through. At the same time, we have an obligation for civic engagement, right? That's part of our calling, I think. So it's okay. Well, how to balance that? So the way I am attempting to balance it currently is my consumption of political information is through long form outlets, like listening to the Tucker Carlson show, which I think is amazing. He does deep dives with people who are very experienced, very well informed. I guess
I support civic engagement. I vote. I wear my sticker. I bring my kids to the voting booth so that they have that experience and they know that is important. So I agree. There are lots of different ways to engage in that way.
Well, and you're doing it far more than most just through your initiatives in education. I mean, how important, how foundational that is to a flourishing society, right? So yeah, so in a way, I think you have a very good approach, which is actions speak louder than words. You're helping society through your actions. Okay, well, let me approach this at another angle then. Can you explain a little bit more about what does school choice mean and how is it being implemented in the different states in this union?
Yeah, it looks different in different states. So in terms of how it's administered, how much funding is applied to it, who can receive it. And so in Ohio, we have what are called Romero Academies, named after the hero Oscar Romero, who calls us not to want more, but to be more. And those schools are Catholic schools that are independently operated. And every child at those schools except for two qualifies for a voucher, and it's about $7,000 per child. Now, there are places that have ESAs, tax credit scholarships. ESAs are really popular. Texas is very likely to pass a universal education savings account, which sets aside dollars for parents to use for the education of their children. How you implement that is really important. Florida has a really expansive school choice program. Arizona does as well. And anytime a school choice program is enacted, the enemy always strikes back. And so a ton of effort has to be put into keeping those programs available, ensuring that they are fully and fairly funded, investing in organizations that educate parents on how to use these programs. So it's not a simple thing, and it's also not a silver bullet. To me, it's a matter of justice.
The enemy always strikes back. What does that mean? Who is the enemy we're talking about here?
I mean, it's in my mind, it is anyone who puts the interests of adults ahead of the needs and interests of children. I'll make it as general of that. And anyone who doesn't honor parents as the primary educators of their children.
Them before us, Katie Faust, who was on one of my earlier episodes. Well, Stephanie, you're just too nice. Can't you just say that the enemy is the teachers' unions or the Department of Education? You got to throw me a bone here.
I have seen teachers' unions do tremendous damage to children, and they're made to put the interests of adults ahead of the interests of children, and so that is not going to change. But I don't think it's just teachers' unions.
What is the solution that you would like to see if you were able to shape education in the U.S. to your liking for the benefit of students? What would you like to see?
Well, that's really interesting. Because I've spent a lot of time thinking about how do you fix it? And I've decided I have no idea how to fix it, frankly. What I know how to do is to build excellent schools that honor parents, that ensure that underserved children get a great academic experience, and that we nurture the habits of good character. I mean, I would ideally want to see dollars follow children and parents having options on where to send their children to school.
Dollars follow children? What does that mean?
So think of it like a backpack. If a parent chooses to send their child to a particular school, public funding goes with that child.
What is so hard about that? I don't understand what is so difficult about that concept and why that isn't just obviously being implemented right now.
Well, there are a lot of interests that don't want to see that implemented, and sometimes there's a lot of fear that children will leave existing public schools, that those public schools will have to shut down, and there's actually good evidence that in places where there are big school choice programs, that public schools actually get better.
That's so counterintuitive. It's almost like you're saying, if I'm getting this correctly, that when there's competition, they actually raise their standards.
They have to. Because parents actually have choices, and then you have to treat parents as the customer.
All right, got it. Okay, because what I was thinking is that the worse the school is doing, the more money we should be pumping into it without looking at other solutions. But it sounds like you're saying something different here. Okay, Matt,
No, I actually don't think, I think money matters. So I'm not going to say money doesn't matter. But throwing money into a school that is not set up to serve children well is not the answer.
Okay, well, I'm glad you clarified my ignorance there. So maybe we can end with, let's end with a positive. What's a nice success story that you'd like to share with us here?
Yeah. So one was my team's response during COVID. We opened 3 schools in 2020. At our Romero Academy in Ohio, we opened in person every day for every child. We took a huge financial hit for doing that.
Well done. That is awesome.
But we believed it was the right thing to do for children and families. And the academic outcomes for our children in that year, I mean, many schools didn't even have their children examined in terms of academic outcomes, but our academic outcomes were amazing in those schools. And then the Bronx was really hard hit by COVID early on, and so many of our parents lost their jobs. So we built what we called the Living Hope campaign. We had, many of our teammates would stand in lines and then personally deliver food, diapers, baby formula to families. And we raised money so that families could pay rent and not be sent to a shelter. And so, those were just like daily heroic responses during the pandemic. And I'm very proud of our team for their work and the philanthropists who supported those efforts.
Amazing. You're going to be blessed for the work that you do, and you already have, I'm sure.
Well, let me just make a couple of pitches. Let's
hear it.
You can go online if you want to learn about us, setonpartners.org. We were named after Elizabeth Ann Seton, who is an amazing human being and an entrepreneur herself. We have a program called Seton Teaching Fellows. We have 56 fellows across the 3 states where we operate, Texas, New York, and Ohio. So if you know, these are typically recent college grads who commit to a year to living together in the communities that we serve, to becoming excellent teachers, and also to lead faith formation work. So if you know of a soon-to-be college grad who doesn't know what to do with their life, go online. I mean, it's a really challenging year and it's a really great year. Every single one of our fellows is transformed, and then 90% of them stay in education, which is really beautiful. So you can go online to find that.
You should recruit at University of Dallas. A lot of them go into teaching.
We do. We have a lot of fellows from the University of Dallas. I mean, we actually recruit across the country. So 47 different universities this year are represented, and you do not have to be an education major. We are looking for people who are willing to commit and sacrifice a year of their lives, and their reward is even greater.
I'm really interested in the lives of the saints. You mentioned Elizabeth Ann Seton. Is there a particular book you recommend about her?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if anybody's, but this is...
Lift it up a little bit higher. So Elizabeth Ann Seton, Catherine O'Donnell. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Seton, Catherine O'Donnell. Okay.
But I don't know if any of your listeners have the Hallow app, but there's a really good series, 7-day series on her life. I mean, she experienced the full range of human experiences, many twists and turns like those of us on this side of heaven. She was a socialite. She was a debutante. She was a mother of 5 children. And also a religious sister. She was an Episcopalian and she was a Catholic. And she founded the first Greek Catholic school in America, which became the foundation for Catholic schooling in this country. So a truly extraordinary woman.
Wow. Sounds like a very American woman, too.
Very American, yes. First American-born saint.
There we go. Love it. Well, maybe you'll follow in her footsteps. So we can, and you're already well on your way.
She has very, very tough shoes to fill. I will say that, but a great model, I think, for everyone.
Well, Stephanie, thank you for the work you've done and that you're doing, and thank you for your time today.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for inviting me.